net export. The US dollar appreciate compared to other currency. How that affect the US net export? Okay, so that's a decrease, right? If the dollars become a more expensive, appreciate, so US goods, right, gonna become more expensive. And when it become more expensive, export will reduce, import increase, and net export reduce. Net export reduce. So you got these, right? So these are the factors that affect the flows of goods in one country. Okay, and you got other things like transportation costs and so on. Right? And also government policy. So the government policy here. Government policy. So assume here we got in a country, a product of a country's, right, is more expensive than the goods produced abroad. However, the country apply a very high tariff rate, and that also prevent import, right? So for example, like in Vietnam, for example, you can see that cars manufacturing in other countries got lower price than cars produced in Vietnam, but the tariff is very high. And because of that, right, we basically cannot import cars from overseas. Okay, so you got these factors that influence the country's flows of goods and services. You got this trade surplus and deficit, so that's simple. Okay, so now next year, right, we're gonna have this one. The flows of capital. The flows of capital. And in the flows of capital here, right, we're going to have here, right, net capital outflows. This is net export, right? This is net capital outflows. And net capital outflows equal to capital outflows minus capital inflows. So you got here, right? Capital outflows minus capital inflows. The capital outflows, capital flows out of our country. So here, right, capital outflows here is the purchase of foreign assets by domestic residents. We, for example, some company in Vietnam may bring capital to invest in Laos, Cambodia. We do foreign direct investment. We come buy foreign assets here. Okay, so the purchase of foreign asset by domestic resident, that's in capital outflows. Capital outflows. Other country, the purchase of domestic asset by foreigners, that's in capital inflows. Capital inflows. So if we attract capital from overseas, right, we got foreign direct investment FDI from overseas, that's in capital outflow. Capital inflows. Capital inflows. So here, right, capital outflows equal to, we got the net capital outflows. Capital outflow minus capital inflows. Okay, so we got this one, capital outflow, inflow, and so on. So what are the factors that affect here the net capital outflow? So the first one here, right? That's the interest rate. Okay, so if I put here, right, I stand for interest rate, I'm going to talk about real interest rate, right? And you got interest rate, domestic interest rate, and foreign interest rate. Domestic interest rate and foreign interest rate. Right? So if domestic interest rate lower than foreign interest rate, and in that case, people are gonna prefer making investment abroad. Right? They will look at the domestic rate and the foreign rate. So what we got here, right? Domestic rate lower than the foreign rate. People are gonna prefer investment abroad, right? And then in that case, you're gonna have capital outflow. The capital gonna flow out of the country to invest in the foreign country with higher rate. On the contrary, if the domestic rate higher than the foreign rate, and then we're gonna have capital inflows. Okay, so the most important factors affect the net capital outflows in the flows of capital. That's the real interest rate paid on domestic assets compared to foreign assets. Yeah. Foreign assets. That's the first one, right? The second one here, that's related to risks. The risk of holding foreign assets, for example. So if you want to invest in a foreign country that pay a very high rate, but that country got political unrest, And in that case, you will not want to invest in those countries, right? So when you invest money abroad, you have to care about this risk of holding foreign assets as well as the government policy affecting foreign ownership of domestic assets. So today, right, no one is going to invest in Russia, for example. Okay, so because we're afraid that the government may have like some policy against the foreign ownership of Russian assets. So we got here, basically that's also related to BRICS as well. So when we talk about flows of capital here, right, this one is the most important one, the difference in interest rate between the two countries. So here, right, you got the flow of capital. So this is the real interest rate, and this is the net capital flow. The real interest rate and the net capital flow. So the net capital flow, right, when this is the real interest rate and domestic rate. So if the domestic rate increase, we can write R stand for real rate. Okay, so here, right, we say if, okay, I can put R here, right, to be consistent. Okay, so if our domestic rate increase, right, and then in that case, the capital inflow will increase. We're going to attract more capital from overseas, so net capital inflow increase and net capital outflow reduce. So R and net capital outflows, this negative relationship, this negative related. So here we see it here, right? That's it downward sloping. It shows the negative relationship between R and net capital outflows. We're going to go back to this graph later on. But here, when we got an open economy and we got these two flows, the flows of goods and the flows of capital here. The flows of capital. Now, right, in the beginning of the sessions here, I'm going to introduce the concept, and then after that, we're going to link the concept together to explain the economic event. Okay. So we got net capital outflow.
Teacher, may I ask?
Yes.
I forget about why the interest rate in domestic is lower than the interest rate in foreign. So this capital outflow, if the interest rate is low, it is not going to borrow more money from the bank in domestic. Why is the outflow?
I know what you mean. When the real interest rate in domestic country is lower than the foreign, right? So for investment, here I'm talking about the free flow of capital. I'm not talking about the case of like Vietnam, right? Because we got capital control, and it kind of like difficult to get money from to overseas from big investment. But I'm talking about free flow of capital. If in the U.S. the interest rate in the U.S. here, or the rate of return in general in the U.S. is higher than the U.K. So people in the U.K. gonna make investment in the U.S. rather than in the U.K. That the rate of return in general. Okay, so for example, like during if you look at the previous month, right, and when the U.S. central bank increased interest rate, and when they increase interest rates, like, they attract a lot of capital from overseas investing to the U.S. Okay, right. So now, by definitions, these two flows here equal. So we got here, right, net capital outflow equal to net export. I'm going to take an example. Assume that Vietnam, right, export goods to the US, and we export goods for the value of $100. Okay, so a company in Vietnam export goods to the US for the value of $100. In that case, right, we're going to have export equal to $100, right? And then you're going to have here, right, net export equal to $100. Assume that other things unchanged, we just got these reductions here, right? So a company in Vietnam export $100 to the US, and then you have export equal to $100 and net export equal to $100. And then the company in Vietnam, right, are paid $100. They pay $100. The $100 notes is the foreign asset, right? Okay, so by definitions here, right, if you look at the net capital outflow, so capital outflow is the purchase of foreign assets by domestic residents. Vietnamese people hold US dollars. That's a capital outflow. Alright? So when we export here, and then we export the value $100 to the US, net export equal to $100, we got $100 note, and that's the capital outflows. We hold foreign assets. Okay, so net capital outflow equal to $100. And these two here are equal. These two are equal. So by definition here, right? And you got the flows of goods and the flows of capital, and they are going in the opposite directions, and they are equal.
Teacher, I have a question. How about if the domestic investor, they invest the money to buy the real estate on the foreign country, for example, that is not the import. That's asset in the domestic country. But it is still the outflow.
Yes, basically, right? If we say we come and buy foreign assets, and basically, if you buy a house in the United States, right? If you buy a house in the United States, and then you buy a foreign assets, right? You buy a foreign assets, that's a capital outflows. Okay, that's a capital outflow, and you need to bring money, right? And then you convert this basically. Let's say when you say about here, right? The flows of capital. So when we buy foreign assets, and when you pay for that, you got a house, and when you pay for that, right? You're gonna need to pay, right? Using, let's say, dollars to pay. So they just basically, right, get from dollars to a house.
But that not mean import that house to Vietnam.
No, you're not import that house in Vietnam. But this is kind of like,
So I don't know why the next of
basically, you're right. Now, if you buy a house in the US, you need to get dollars, right? Okay, so you got dollars already, and then you get dollars to the house in the United States. So then you should offset that. Then change the kinds of assets. Capital of outflows stay the same. Okay, and then the next one here, right?
But if what if I invest that house and it increase the value, then I sell that and I have the surplus money from my investment.
Mm.
Yeah. It's still inflow to the inflow, the money inflow, right? I withdraw that money in Vietnam.
So you're gonna get that money back to Vietnam. You got a capital inflows in Vietnam to make investment in Vietnam, for example, right?
Yes.
And in that case, right, you got the capital inflows here. But then you're gonna use this money here, right? You hold it, and then you're gonna either keep that money in Vietnam, or you're gonna use it to buy the assets in Vietnam.
Yeah, but my activity is not influenced to the export and import.
But it's gonna be offset in one. So net capital outflow can be 0. And it got no impact on these things. So it's just like when you use dollars here, right, to buy a house. So it should train the time of assets here.
I think that in case she gets some profit from the house, and then she sell the house and take the money back to Vietnam. So can we consider that the profit is the inflow?
Yeah, so the flows of capital here, right? You got that flows in Vietnam, but then in this one here, right? In the flows of capital here, right? Because I do not want to go into detail into that. Because basically here in every country you got the balance of payment. And in the balance of payment here, right, you got the flows of goods and then the flows of capital and the flows of transfer payment. So there's a lot of things going on, and then one offset we got the from investment and so on. Right? So I basically don't want to go into that details. But basically, for those transactions, like there's one something in this and that offset each other, and then capital flow stays the same.
But I haven't got that part because if I import products from the foreign country, I also have to exchange the money to that current
Yes,
currency. Yeah, but the difference here is if I import and export, the goods is turn trade to my country or trade to another country. But if I bring the money to invest in other asset in that country,
Then this one change. So one type product trade and the other one is still in that kind of outflow to offset each other.
but if you exchange the money in that case, you can also exchange the money import and export case.
No. Here, right. The first one, where you got dollars to make investment and gold.
The money is my money.
But where's that money from, right? It needs to go from other connections. Okay, so your money here, right? Where the bank got money to change it to you. They're gonna get money here, right, from other export companies. So you're gonna go all the way.
You mean that I have to exchange, for example,
Okay, so to say here, right? When you buy dollars,
to dollars?
yeah, when you buy, I mean, I'm talking about country, right? When you buy dollars in Vietnam, that dollar need to be from some kind of transaction before. So a company, for example, export goods, or some foreigners send dollars to Vietnam, for example, to make investment in Vietnam, it needs to be somewhere before. So it's just like trade from hands to hands only. And then you bring that dollars outside to make investment, right? You're gonna convert from one time to another.
But if
Roger, so I'm sorry, but for that case, like, if you're not change, but because we don't have time, right, so I'm sorry, I wouldn't talk about that maybe after the break, but here, right, we need to continue on. Okay, so we got, that's the flows of net export and capital, right, and by definition, they are equal. By definition, they're equal. So we got these things here, right? Equality. So you got some example here. For example, when a foreigner purchase goods, right, and when they import here. Okay, so that citizen buy foreign goods, example. So basically, we got every country they got a balance of payment. A balance of payment. In the balance of payment here, right, we got the current account represent these flows of goods. And you got the balance of capital here, right? That's in the net receipt from capital transactions. So from that. So the flows of goods and the flows of capital here, right, gonna be explained here in the balance of payment. And by definition, it's like, so these two here are equal. And in the balance of payment here, right, they're gonna construct it in a way that we got this and these are equal here. These are equal. Of course, in the real balance of payment, because of the way that we do the transactions, right? So some transactions may not be recorded properly, so they may not be really equal. So they're gonna have like some errors. But if we record them, I mean, in all accounts, they should be equal. Yeah, they should be equal. Okay, so that's the balance of payment. I guess I'm gonna ignore this. Now, right, next we're gonna talk about exchange rate. Okay, so next here, right, we're gonna talk about exchange rate. Exchange rate here is the price of one currency in terms of the others. So the price of one currency here, right, in terms of the others. So for example, we say $1 equal to say 23,000 VND. Okay, that's the exchange rate. the price of one currency in terms of the others. So now, right, because Vietnam now is too many numbers, so I'm going to assume that the local or the home currency is dollars, and then so that's in dollar, right? And it's also in the book that we use. So dollar here, and just assume that the foreign currency we're going to use here is pound. Okay, so we're going to use dollar and pound. Dollar is the local currency, and pound is the foreign currency. So basically, we have here right, different ways of quoting exchange rate. Assume that right, we are here in the US. And if we quote $1 equal to say 0.7 pound. Okay, so we go over here, right? $1 equal to 0.7 pound. We say one domestic currency equal to how many units of foreign currency? Or we can quote 1 pound equal to $1.2, for example. In this case, we quote one foreign currency equal to how many units of domestic currency? Okay, in Vietnam, we use this quotation, right? We quote 1 pound equal to 26,000, $1 equal to 23,000. So we quote one foreign currency equal to how many units in domestic currency? Okay, so it's just like we quote 1 apple equal to 10,000, 1 kilo of pork equal to 100,000. So $1 equal to 23,000. That's in the number we will quote, and we call this indirect quotations. Okay, so direct quotations here is one foreign currency equal to how many units in domestic currency. And for this one, right, we call $1 equal to how many units of foreign currency. This is indirect quotations. Indirect quotations. Most countries in the world use direct quotations. So Vietnam, we use direct quotations. Many countries use direct quotations, with some exceptions. In the US, they use indirect quotations. So they always quote $1 equal to how many units of foreign currency. In England, they also use indirect quotation. They quote 1 pound equal to how many units of foreign currency. In the Eurozone country, they also use indirect quotation. They use €1 equal to how many units of foreign currency. So basically, the textbook that we use, they use indirect quotations because that's the American textbook. So they use indirect quotations, but in Vietnam, we use direct quotations. So please keep that in mind. In the textbook here, right, if we use here, right, $1 equal to 0.7 pound. And then, so this is the strand, right? Now the strand becomes $1 equal to 0.8 pound. Okay, so original $1 equal to 0.7 pound. Now $1 equal to 0.8 pound. Exchange rate, in this case, right, exchange rate increase, right? Dollar appreciate or depreciate. Appreciate means increase in value. Depreciate means decrease in value. Appreciate. So this is case, right? Dollar. And dollars here is the domestic currency. So I say DC stands for domestic currency, and domestic currency appreciate. Appreciate. So if for indirect quotations, when exchange rate increase, the domestic currency appreciate. Appreciate. Okay? Right? But in the case of Vietnam, if we say $1 equal to 23,000 dong. $1, right? And now increase $1 equal to 24,000 dong. Exchange rate increase and the Vietnamese dong depreciate. Depreciate. Okay, so that's the difference here, right? We study in the textbook here, and then they say when exchange rate increase, and then dollar appreciate. But then we read newspapers in Vietnam, right? And we say exchange rate increase, and then Vietnamese don't depreciate. That's normal because we use different ways of quotations.
Mấy cái từ mà trong tiếng Việt
So,
mấy cái từ mà trong tiếng Việt chuyên ngành kinh tế tiếng Anh thì nhưng mà tiếng Việt thì nó cái từ gì nào?
từ appreciate là từ gì?
Appreciate và depreciate.
Tăng giá, giảm giá thôi. Okay, appreciate and depreciate. And here, right, I'm gonna have this. We got depreciate and devalue. Anybody know the difference between these two? Depreciate and devalue. A currency depreciate and a currency devalue. So depreciate basically just means reduce. Devalue, we use devalue in a country that uses fixed exchange rate. So we start with China, for example. So we say China devalue the renminbi. Devalue in this case means phá giá đồng tiền. So we use devalue. Tăng giảm bình thường mình chỉ nói là depreciate thôi. Đồng tiền giảm giá do thị trường thôi thì mình dùng chữ depreciate. And when you read newspaper, right, you see China devalued the renminbi, and that's the government devalued the currency and apply in the fixed exchange rate. But for other currency, we just use appreciate and depreciate. Okay, so that's in exchange rate in different inflation, right? And in exchange rate, you can have the spot transactions and the forward transactions. So spot, that means we buy and sell the currency today, right? And then forward here, that means we're gonna buy them sometime in the future. But the rate is so appreciation and depreciations. Okay, that's simple. So now, what are the factors that affect the exchange rate in the long run? So we're gonna have here, right? Factors that affect the exchange rate in the long run and in the short run. So we're talking about the long run, the long period of time, and in short run, right, a short period of time. So in the long run here, right, F is the long run. The factors that affect the exchange rate in the long run, normally, these are the factors affect the flows of goods and services. The flows of goods and services. In the short run, the exchange rate is affected more by the flows of capital. The flows of capital. Can you see, if you see that, right, the flows of capital is a lot quicker, right, than the flows of goods and services. If you see that a country, the interest rate increase, and then money can be easily flow from the country, right, to another country. So the flows of capital is a lot faster. But if you look at the flows of goods and services, right, and then, okay, we see that the other countries, the goods cheaper, but then we could not be able to import goods from overseas in a single day. Right? So those are going to affect the FX here in the long run. So now we're going to have here, right, factors that affect the exchange rate in the short run and in the long run. Okay, so the first one here, right, FX in the long run. So these are the factors that exchange affects FX here for exchange in the long run. The first one here, right, we're going to have here the PPP. So PPP stands for purchasing power parity. Purchasing power parity, ngang giá sức mua, purchasing power parity. So what is the purchasing power parity? The purchasing power parity basically it comes from the law of one price. The law of one price say goods should have the same price in different locations. So assume here, right, I got an apple in Hanoi. So I got the apple, right? Apple. So assume the apple the same. So apple in Hanoi is 10,000 per kilo. right? And apple in Ho Chi Minh City is $15,000 per kilo. $15,000 per kilo. So if we got price discrepancy, so different in price, we call them price discrepancies. People gonna buy apple in Hanoi and sell them in Ho Chi Minh City and assume that transaction cost is negligible. Right, so assume that there's no transaction cost. So in that case, right, buy apple in Hanoi and sell them in Ho Chi Minh City, there's gonna be higher demand for apple in Hanoi. Right, price increase, and there's gonna be more supply in Ho Chi Minh City, price reduce until these two equal. So price maybe after this, right, maybe $12 in each place, for example. So price are equal, and that's in the law of one price. The law of one price. So the law of one price says price of identical goods to be the same throughout the world if trade barriers are low. So we assume that there's no tariff, no trade barrier, transaction costs are low. Right? In the real life, you got the law of one price, but you may add a transaction cost, so transportation, tariff, and so on and all that. But you got this one. So that's in one country. One country. So now I got here, right, the price of apple in the US. So in the US, one apple equal to $1. One apple equal to $1. And then in Japan, one apple equal to 100 yen. One apple in the US is $100, and in Japan, right, one apple in Japan is 100 yen. Is 100 yen. And now assume that the exchange rate here is $1 equal to 100 yen. Okay, so now you're gonna see that, okay, apple in the US and apple in Japan, they are equal because when we convert in the same currency, they're equal. So that's the purchasing power parity. Goods have the same price if we convert it into the same currency. So an apple in the US is $1, an apple in Japan is 100 yen, and if the exchange rate is $1 equal to 100 yen, we got purchasing power parity. Of course, in the real life, right, we'll talk about a basket of goods and services here, right? But here for simplicity, we'll just assume apple. So now let's assume we got inflations in the US. We got inflation in the US. No inflation in Japan. So assume we got inflation in the US, and now one apple in the US costs $1.1. One apple in the US costs $1.1. The exchange rate is the same, $1 equal to 100 yen. And then in Japan it's still 100 yen, right? And in that case, the price of apple in Japan is cheaper than the price of apple in the US. What people are gonna do here, they're gonna buy apple in Japan. So for example, if I got $1, right, I'm gonna get $1, I'm gonna convert to 100 yen. I'm gonna buy one apple in Japan. Of course here I'm talking about like, assume that transportation cost is negligible, we ignore it, right? And then I'm gonna, as apple in Japan, I'm gonna sell them in the US. I'm gonna get $1.1, and I make a profit, right? Right? Of course, this is just one apple. I can buy 1,000, 1,000,000 apples, for example. So my profit will be a lot larger. Okay. So what transactions here is I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that. And if I do that, right, a lot of people are gonna do that as well. A lot of people are gonna do that as well. They're gonna get $1, convert it in yen, and then do these transactions and get this profit here. But when we do these transactions here, we basically sell dollar to buy yen. So if a lot of people sell dollar to buy yen, yen will increase in value. Okay? So there's going to be higher demand for Japanese yen to buy Japanese goods. So when there are high demand for Japanese yen to buy higher Japanese goods here, right? Yen will increase in value. Yen will increase in value. And then if the exchange rate here, right? So $1.1 equals to 100 yen. Right, so this is around like $1 equal to around like 90 something yen, right? In this case, right, yen increase in value, right? Yen increase in value. And in the exchange rate here, right, $1 equal to 90 yen. And then if you want to buy 100 yen here, right, you need to pay $1.1. To buy 100 yen, you get an apple, and then you get 1.1. No more profit. No more profit. So with that transaction, our exchange rate gonna change to that one. And here you're gonna see the yen here, right, appreciate and dollar depreciate. So that's the conclusion from purchasing power parity. Purchasing power parity say if a country got higher inflation than the other countries, its currency will depreciate. Okay, so that's the fact, right? PPP. If a country got higher inflation, so higher, I say pi stands for inflation, and then the currency will depreciate. If a country got higher inflation, we'll see its currency depreciate. Okay, and then you can see there's a lot of real sample in practice, especially for those countries, right, that print a lot of money. So when they print a lot of money, they got high inflation, and at the same time, the currency depreciate. So the PPP basically say, if a country got high inflation, the currency will depreciate. So that we're gonna have PPP. So that's the PPP rate affect the theory here, right, the exchange rate in the long run. So these are just explanations. Okay, so here, right, you got this is the PPP, right? The PPP showing the relative price level, and this is the exchange rate. So over time, right, you can see that they somehow fall over, then there will be some bit of time and lower. Sorry, right? So PPP is just only one of the factors here. And in this is quite like some story. So in 1986, The Economics, so that's one of the most famous magazines related to economics, banking, and finance, and they published what is called a Big Mac Index. So they basically say we got McDonald's everywhere. We got McDonald's in every single country, and according to PPP, the price of McDonald's will be the same if we convert it into the same currency. So in Vietnam, we got Big Mac. In the US, we got Big Mac. In other countries, we got Big Mac here. So they basically developed the Big Mac Index. So they try to derive the exchange rate based on the comparison of price of Big Mac here. So here, right, if the one apple in the US is $1, $1.1, one apple in the US here, right, is 100. So exchange rate will be 1.1 equal to 100 here. So if a Big Mac in Vietnam costs 70,000 and a Big Mac in the US costs $3, so exchange rate is going to be $3 equal to 70,000. That's how the economics developed the funding index called the Big Mac index based on PPP.
So it's just for one number.
Yeah, it's for fun. Okay, but they developed until basically in 1986. And they still got the Big Mac index going on now. They're still reported. Okay, so you got that one. Kind of fun.
I heard about it a year ago.
Yeah. So right. So further here, right? Anything that increase demand for domestic product goods relative to foreign goods that appreciate domestic currency. So you got relative price here. That's here. This PPP. Right, but of course you're going to have here, right, trade barriers, some preference of the domestic goods versus foreign goods, for example, and this is one very important one here, right, productivity. So the USA is here, right, is one of the strongest currency in the world, because backed by that, we got the US economy. We got the US economy, so that's in the long run. You're right, so we got productivity. A currency is strong currency, if you got a strong economy stand behind. Okay, so you got here right productivity, and also you got the other things like trade barriers and preferences. Okay, so this is summary. Okay, so here right, price change. So if domestic price level increase and you got inflation, domestic currency depreciate and vice versa. For productivity, right? So if we got increase in domestic productivity, and then domestic price decline, domestic currency appreciate. So if a country, right, you got a booming time, and you will see that during that time the currency appreciates as well. And then you got here, right, preference. So these are kind of a summary of the long run.
Does the strength of currency relate to the strength of
Yes. So that's related to productivity.
Is productivity about the strength of the economy?
Productivity is like a word stand for a lot of different things, including strength. Okay. So now the strength rate in the short run. So FX here, right? In the short run. So you said, right, in the long run, basically the foreign exchange rate here is affected by the flows of goods and services. So if here, right, people demand our products more, they're gonna need to buy our products, right? And they're gonna increase the value of our currency. Okay, and then other country, right, in the short run, it basically affected more by the flows of capital. And when we talk about the flows of capital, right, the most important factors gonna be interest rate. So we compare, right, the domestic interest rate and the foreign interest rate. Domestic rates and foreign rates, and because it's getting more, right, so basically that's the rate of returns. So if the domestic rate is higher than the foreign rate, we're gonna attract more capital invest in our countries. And when people invest in our country, the demand for domestic currency increase and domestic currency appreciate. Okay, so during the previous month, right, you can see that the central bank in the USA increased their interest rate. So when they increase the interest rate here, right, and then they attract a lot of capital coming back to the USA and increase the value of US dollars. Increase the value of the US dollars. So if you see, right, now it's kind of the dollars, the capital is going down, but if you look at the periods last years, right, in last 2022, you see that the US dollars appreciate a lot compared to other currency. And that's because here, right, interest rate here increase. The interest rate increase. So if here, right, the domestic rate higher, and then you can see domestic currency appreciate. Domestic currency appreciate. Right, and then also you got expectations. So expectations here, expectations related to those things. Expectation related to inflation, expectation related to productivity, and so on and on. Okay, so now I got an example here.